analyzed Fazbear Entertainment's ridiculous lawsuits and violations to see just what and how many there are and how much it would cost them. Cause out of all the extensive topics this channel has spent hours on end researching, this one is brutal, specifically in showing us just how many lawsuits upon one reckless violation after another that Fazbear would be getting shoved into its face, literally burying the company in a mountain of bankruptcy. So getting into the numerous violations and obvious to not so obvious lawsuits across the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, when it comes to the lawsuits that Fazbear Entertainment would be facing, the company itself would generally be up against a mountain of what are known as civil actions or cases. In civil cases, the defendant, like Fazbear, is held accountable to the victim, being either the injured person or a surviving loved one who has decided to take action for the death of a family member. Civil cases, unlike criminal, fight to find the defendant guilty of negligence that resulted in the unintended injury or death, have a lower burden of proof, being much easier for a jury to find the defendant accountable for any damages. This is separate from criminal cases, where the defendant is held accountable to the state, where the government files a case against someone in order to punish them for deliberately committing a crime, like William Afton, who we know is committing outright murder, and would subsequently be facing a mountain of criminal charges if he was ever caught. In civil cases, if the defendant, like Fazbear, is found to be legally responsible for the numerous deaths, injuries, and violations, they would then be held responsible for paying monetary damages, while criminal cases would result in Fazbear and high-ranking members of its ownership being incarcerated for a certain period of time. Heck, even certain employees could face some serious jail time if they were found to be an accomplice in any of Fazbear's criminal lawsuits. However, Fazbear could face both criminal and civil lawsuits at the same time, and this video more so covers the numerous things that have happened and have clearly been neglected that would very likely see Fazbear coming face to face with their employees and customers in the court of law, rather than detailing the many OSHA violations that are lying around, that while terrible, employees and customers cannot directly sue Fazbear for, as all OSHA violations must instead be reported to OSHA, who will then handle the violations if they have occurred. So now, getting into Fazbear's many lawsuit misdeeds, we come to the beginning of our timeline, based off of the Game Theorist timeline, where William Afton first created his dream restaurant, Fredbear's, having a dancing bear Fredbear and bunny of his own creation named Bonnie on stage before a crowd of happy children, and having employees dancing in the handmade suits, never did anything to warrant a lawsuit. It was only soon after this that he was ran out of business by his competitor Henry, who did the same thing but only better, creating actual singing and dancing animatronics in what was known as Chica's Party World. Again, not doing anything with his small location and immobile animatronics that would injure someone and get him sued, and close his business to William's dismay. But Henry, seeing William's genius when it came to making up ideas that would sell big time, not soon after bailed out William's failing restaurant, merging the two into the one and only Freddy Fazbear's Diner. And this is where things actually begin to go south for the two, as after making their new and better multi-million-dollar animatronics like Foxy, a new Chica, Bonnie, and Freddy that can freely walk around, their first known injury happens in what is known as the Bite of 83. 83 standing for the year 1983, where in an utterly horrible event, William Afton's youngest son, being bullied by his older brother and his friends, possibly being named Gregory or Evan, was picked up and placed inside the mouth of Fredbear, where Fredbear's mouth, either from having its spring locks reportedly malfunctioning, from the squirming and tears of the kid stuck inside his mouth, or from its general movements, closed on the young boy's head, resulting in his death later in a hospital, as the sound of a heart monitor flatlining can later be heard in the background. Seeing how this incident happened during normal operating hours with employees likely being present in the building and his 4 accomplices, it would be hard to keep the death of one of the owner's sons quiet, especially since it happened on the main stage of the restaurant with the headline animatronic, and what these kids just committed is a form of involuntary manslaughter, known as constructive manslaughter, which occurs when someone kills without the intent to do so in the course of committing an unlawful act. If the kids present, who may be in their early teens, some sources speculate around 13, were to likely be tried as juveniles, would see them being given a juvenile detention order and be charged with juvenile delinquency, where they could remain in custody of whatever treatment facility the court orders them to go to until they reach the age majority of 18. However, in certain cases, the juveniles may be charged as adults, which would then see them as being sentenced with anywhere from 30 years to life in prison in an adult facility with additional fines of up to $200,000 each. Now, since William, the owner, is the father of the deceased child who died in his own establishment, while he may not sue his own company, he could finally attempt to take his chance to go after his business partner and rival Henry. Henry, who was the one who constructed the animatronics in the first place. If William at this early point in his career didn't necessarily have anything to do with the designs of the animatronics, and thus the incredible bite force they have that easily crushed the skull of his child, William could take Henry to civil court, and being the rightful guardian of the deceased, William could file a lawsuit against Henry for a number of reasons, including what is known as wrongful death. Wrongful death being a fatal accident caused by the negligence, wrongful act, or fault of another person, business, or entity. Whether William would win this lawsuit is anyone's guess, but if found guilty of negligence for creating animatronics that contain these incredibly powerful pneumatic pistons and actuators that let these guys fully walk around, sprint, and have such a strong bite force, Henry could owe William anywhere from the average $500,000 to $1 million in damages, although some wrongful death cases can result in even more. And perhaps William could even move to expel Henry and his negligent ways of creating animatronics from the Fazbear business altogether. Despite all this, William and Henry, still in business together, were raking in the cash, having opened up their own Freddy Fazbear pizza chain that resulted in their own cartoon show, Fazbear and Friends. And it's at this time that William, drunk and resentful, decided to commit the first of many murders, with William driving by Fazbear's one night only to see Henry's daughter Charlie locked outside of the restaurant. So William, in a spur of the moment, then takes his chance, killing Charlie, assumingly to get back at Henry for buying him out and the death of his son, letting his resentments loose on the poor girl. Presumably this murder was unplanned, and was an intoxicated William reacting to the surprise opportunity of finding Charlie locked outside all alone, which could likely qualify as second-degree murder, being an intentional but unplanned murder, or the accused person may have acted out of anger. While being considered a lesser crime than first-degree murder, if found out, William would be facing long-term to a lifetime imprisonment, and would absolutely be kicked out of the Fazbear company, along with paying damages to Henry that could range in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. But William was never found out to be the murderer, and Henry, despite his suspicions, never made a move on William. As time rolled on, Henry grieved over his daughter, as William paid to have a secret lab built under his house, started his robotic company Afton Robotics, and went to work designing his new animatronics. Then it was on June 26, 1985, William, on the grounds of his own company, decided to put on his Yellow Bonnie springlock suit and lured more children one by one to the back of the pizzeria and out of sight of any other customers, employees, and security cameras, this time killing 5 innocent kids and stuffing them into the animatronic suits, with each of these murders holding their own life in prison sentence, and assuming William is around 44 years old, give or take a year, and if William lived to the average male's life expectancy of 73, we could find that William would be spending what would be close to another 150 years in prison from this violent incident that came to be known as the Missing Children's Incident. However, despite not having footage in the back of the heinous murders themselves, security did catch someone inside the Golden Bonnie mascot suit luring kids from within the pizzeria's public areas to the back. Police even went so far as to identify William himself as the man within the suit, but failed to find the bodies of the missing children, with newspapers saying that due to this fact, despite knowing that William was the one in the mascot suit luring the exact missing children to the back of the pizzeria for no good reason, with that footage being the very last time those kids were ever seen, along with the fact that Henry could also come forward with the suspicions that William may have had something to do with his daughter's disappearance, William was said to have never been convicted, And this would not be the case, as all of this evidence, plus any further evidence of any blood or DNA from the kids being in the back area of the pizzeria, let alone any trace of it being on the mascot Bonnie's suit that William was wearing, especially from William's rather gruesome murder of Casey, and perhaps even without the blood if William somehow managed to wash all of it off, could still make William convicted by a jury for 5 accounts of first-degree murder, as you do not actually need the bodies of the victims to charge someone with murder. If this were the case, in the words of a prosecutor, you'd be encouraging people to hide bodies and rewarding people who are successful at it. All that is needed is enough circumstantial evidence for a jury to infer that the victim is dead and that the defendant is guilty. And this would put William in a tight spot of easily life in prison and quite possibly the death penalty. But not being convicted of murder, William, for still having some incredibly shady actions when it came to the public, gave Henry the leverage to appeal to a civil court and got William expelled from the Fazbear Entertainment Company, as Henry then closed the doors to the restaurants. Seeing how criminal action felt against William, this still means that at the very least, Fazbear Entertainment could be convicted on the wrongful death of the 5 children within their own company, due to things like negligence of safety and general misconduct, filing a class action lawsuit where a plaintiff sues a defendant on behalf of a larger group, like the group of the dead kids' parents. This could mean that Fazbear Entertainment would be paying out anywhere from a low $250,000 to $5 million or more to every family involved. 2 years went by when, in 1987, William laid low while Henry once again opened up a new reimagined Fazbear, rolling out his new toy animatronics that were much friendlier and were specifically geared towards protecting children, hosting specific technologies like facial scanners that were connected to the criminal database. Despite this, William still managed to sneak into the new reopened Fazbear restaurant and committed yet again 5 more acts of first-degree murder, and he would likely just get the death penalty at this point, and really not knowing what happened to their kids this time, only that they mysteriously disappeared just like the other kids years ago. If the police really didn't suspect William of the murders, the families could again take Fazbear Entertainment to court, charging the company with more accounts of wrongful death, if not attempting to charge Henry and any other high-ranking members with the criminal charge of involuntary manslaughter for reckless and negligent behavior for attempting to reopen such an establishment with all the old suits and animatronics involved in all these incidents over the years hiding in the back. And this would yet again see Fazbear paying out even more money to the parents. But it's here in 1987 that another famous incident happened yet again, as a few days later, one of the animatronics like Foxy malfunctioned and bit off the frontal lobe of an unnamed individual that's possibly an employee. While injured workers, due to workers' compensation for injuries, typically can't sue an employer for an injury, there are exceptions, and this is most likely one of them. In this case, the employee lived, but with severe damage, and coupled with the company's past history, may allow the employee to sue for negligent damages, as the animatronic completely malfunctioned, taking off a significant portion of the employee's brain, completely changing his life, which could cost Fazbear Entertainment in the upwards of a few to possibly over $13 million, as the highest paid workers' compensation case in the US resulted in a worker being paid $13.2 million after an iron worker was struck by a car. And with these unfortunate acts, Freddy Fazbear shut down again, as William attempted to open Circus Baby's Pizza World, which never saw the light of day, as his daughter was accidentally killed by his Circus Baby animatronic due to William's negligence. If William's wife Clara Afton was in fact alive and became aware of this incident, she could absolutely pursue both criminal and civil actions against William, one for criminally negligent manslaughter, or in this case, criminally negligent homicide, as is used in the US, where William's serious recklessness for creating animatronics like Circus Baby, who has a built-in scooper for capturing and likely killing children, and failure to exercise reasonable care of his daughter around his machines would see him being convicted by a jury and spending 1 to 10 years in prison with a fine of around $15,000, if not more. Not too bad for William, but this could happen along with William being hit by Clara with the civil action of the wrongful death of her child due to his clear negligence and misconduct. That needing an even lower standard of proof than his negligent homicide would also see William being fined anywhere from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of compensation, possibly somewhere on the high end, seeing how insanely rich William and Henry are, as we went over. But then things take a drastic turn, and as hard as researching law and trying to fill in the blank of which highly specific term for murder goes to which incident has been for Fazbear's past, it seems to just be winding up for the lawsuits that come when things get bigger. As not too soon after the death of his daughter, William would sneak into the now closed down Fazbear restaurant to see what weirdness was going on with the animatronics, who were actually possessed by the souls of the dead children. Upon dismantling them and being chased down by the ghosts of the children he murdered, William became trapped within his own spring-lock Bonnie suit. That quickly malfunctioned, slowly killing him as he bled to death. Where supposedly Henry found him and had the room sealed off, leaving William to his fate. So yeah, if Henry did in fact find William trapped within his own suit, bleeding to death, and then left him to die, from this act, when it comes to the United States, Henry isn't liable for anything. While some countries have laws called duty to rescue, where citizens must help another party within reason to their own well-being, but will be held liable if they walk away or if they act recklessly, could spend 6 months in prison. The United States has no such law. Other than the moral implications of leaving someone in need of help, Henry's sealing off of the room, on the other hand, is bad, as Henry deliberately made sure no one could come to William's aid, and that William wouldn't be able to get out to find help implicates Henry in what could be seen as second-degree murder. Basically, it's knowing that your actions will cause the death of another person, quickly putting Henry in a long-term imprisonment to possibly life in prison. In total, the amount of damages that Fazbear, Henry, and William may be accountable for paying out to either each other or their customers in Fazbear's early days for Fazbear Entertainment is roughly $65 million, if not way more. Then around $1 million for Henry, along with him spending long-term to life in prison, and for William Afton at the very least would be paying out $65 million, if not more, who would be looking at 11 life sentences equating to 330 years in prison and quite likely the death penalty. So there we have it, the first part in a series on Fazbear's lawsuits, with the Mega Pizzaplex really heating things up to the max next. But if none of this was very interesting, then I saved an interesting fact for last. William and even Henry, if sued for millions, really wouldn't be bothered at all. No, the only thing that could stop these guys, not death mind you, is jail, as the amount of money that they have made off of Fazbear Entertainment is easily in the tens of billions. So after you check out the second part of this series, you might want to check out how much money Fazbear Entertainment really makes in the other video. See you in the next one.